Hello, I'm Brett Gilliland, host of the Circuit of Success podcast, and here's what's coming up.
So my career started at a time where there were hardly any executive level females. I would be in boardrooms and wherever I was, and everyone was a man. You didn't have a pivotal moment. You had to survive, is what I'm saying. You had to survive. I made up my mind early on what I wanted to do and what I wanted to achieve, and I knew I just had to do it with perseverance, diligence, and I just worked and worked and worked to make that happen.
So we're live here, ladies. So we are, we'll let some people join here for a little bit and before we get started. But we're excited today to celebrate Women's History Month here at Visionary Wealth Advisors. And I've got two distinguished guests. Katie Martin is with me, and also Elizabeth Connelly is with me. So we're excited to spend some time today and get to know them and their careers and how blessed we are to get to work with them every day. So again, I will wait just a little bit longer to make sure we are live and kicking. It's 11 o'clock, and also going over to YouTube to check that out right now. So we are here. Okay, we're live on at least on YouTube. So that's good. So we'll exit out of there and then go over here to LinkedIn and make sure we are live there, which it looks like we are. So yes, we are live. So, all right, great stuff. Well, I want to get started. So again, I have Katie Martin with me. Katie Martin is a chartered financial analyst, a CFP, certified financial planner. We have Elizabeth Connelly with us, who is a JD, a certified trust specialist and a certified IRA specialist, with two distinguished careers that you all have, and we get the fortune of working with you two every single day here at Visionary. So if you could, these are always big open questions, I know, but I'd like to start with you, Katie, if we can, and just share a little bit about your career story and what's made you the woman you are today.
Sure. So I started in a rotational program at an investment firm right out of college. And at the end of that time, I moved into our investment research area. So I started as an associate analyst helping out some equity analysts. And then in 2005, transitioned into a new area, which was our manager research area. So it was exciting to be the third person on that team and then help to play a role in growing that team from 3 to over 30 over the course of the next 10 to 15 years. So it was a great opportunity to take on increasing responsibility over time. Eventually I was responsible for leading a team of analysts and then also leading some cross-divisional projects at the firm. So I did that for about 17 years and then reached a point in my career where I decided it was time to make a change and look to pivot to a role that was more autonomous and flexible, but most importantly was one where I had wanted to feel like I was making more of a difference to an individual and working with individual clients. So that's how I found Visionary, and I've been a wealth management advisor at Visionary since October of 2019.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for sharing that story. And Elizabeth, how about you?
So I'll go back a little farther than Katie did. When I was little, I played like a lawyer. I sat at a dining room table and I would argue with my brother. And my brother would have this old stethoscope around his neck because he wanted to be a doctor. And we're little bitty kids at that time. Well, he is a doctor and I am a lawyer now. So it came full circle. But in my career, all during my life, when I went to college, I tried everything. I computer science, things in math, things in business. But I had an advisor. I had a female advisor at that time, an academic advisor, and she told me that I was going to take the LSAT because I had shared with her at one point in time that I played like I was going to be a lawyer. Well, somehow I passed that exam in a decent way, and she said, well, now you're going to apply to law school. So I applied to one law school, St. Louis University. I got in, and I said to her, well, now what am I going to do? Because I had accepted a job at Macy's in their management trainee program. I was getting ready to graduate college. And she said, well, you're going to go tell them you're not taking that job and you're going to law school. So I went to law school, and it was fun. When I was there, I always wanted to be a litigator. And in my young mind, I worked in a firm. I got to try a wrongful death case. And the life of a litigator is up and down and up and down. And so at that time, I thought, well, I would like to be married and have a family someday. And it wouldn't fit, right? That's what my young mind thought. So I specialized. I went over and I interviewed for a job in the banking field, and there started my career. I was so lucky, unbeknownst to me, because I walked into an environment where I handled both institutional and personal money, and most advisors specialize in one area or the other. So I actually grew up in my field doing both, and I am forever grateful for that. And over the years, I had various opportunities that I took advantage of and found my way for client purposes into the arena that I'm now in. So the independent registered advisor, and it has been wonderful, and it's the exact right place for clients.
And you do an amazing job of it, so it's a big deal. So I'm a big fan of these defining moments, right? I think we all have defining moments in our careers, in our lives. I think back to my first year in the business was 2001. I started late 01, but 2002 great year. 2003 terrible year, right? Like surprised they even let me stay on as a financial advisor. I just didn't do much, right? As an advisor. I'm curious for you too, Katie. We'll start with you on any pivotal moments or defining moments for you in your career and that help you take action to where you're at today.
Yeah, so I put some thought into that after we had our initial conversation to prepare for that, and you shared your, very specific example of what kind of got you to where you are. And so I tried to think if there were any points in my career that I would define as that one pivotal moment. And I don't know that there is anything quite that specific. And what I would say is it's really more of a culmination of things for me. So I guess I'm somebody who's kind of always thrived on that external validation. So when I was in school, that meant, seeing if you can get good grades. And then when I was in my corporate role, that meant kind of moving up to that next role in my firm. Yeah. And so, when I finally got to the point where I was in my existing role and looking to what would be next and realized that I wasn't so sure that that was something that was right for me at the time, it really forced me to go back and think a little bit harder about, okay, what is that next step? And so I kind of point to that as what it was that got me to kind of make that change that I needed to make at that time.
Were you always a good student? Like, was it easy for your parents? If you look back, you could have that discussion when you're in high school. And the reason I ask, I joke, this isn't about, kids and stuff, this podcast, but, we've got 4 boys, you've got 2 girls, you are a girl. My wife, obviously, she talks about the difference of what it was like when she was doing schoolwork and these boys, right? So do you see a difference there?
Yeah. I mean, I was fortunate that school always came easily to me. So it was easy for me to get good grades. And that was something that was important to me. Now, if you try to put me on a softball field or a volleyball court, then the story would be a lot different. So, when I look at my own kids, you definitely see kind of the difference. It's always, we could have a whole separate conversation on how different kids that are raised in the same environment from the same parents can be. But, so I think being good in school was fortunately something that was kind of easy to me.
Good. Elizabeth, what about you? What were some of those defining moments in your career?
I've thought about this a lot. And so my career started at a time where there were hardly any executive level females. And so my path was very different than nowadays. And I would say there's not any one moment, factually, not in a complaining way. Any female, I was never at a table where there was another executive female. I would be in boardrooms and wherever I was, and everyone was a man. And so in my world, you didn't have a pivotal moment. You had to survive, is what I'm saying. You had to survive. And so I made up my mind early on what I wanted to do and what I wanted to achieve. And I knew I just had to do it with perseverance, diligence, and not really speaking out, because in that day and age, if you spoke out, you lost your job. That's just kind of how it was. And so instead of pivotal moments that are obvious, they were more internal pivotal moments that I would achieve. I always had in my mind what I wanted to achieve by what age that I was, and I just worked and worked and worked to make that happen. Yeah.
It's great. So let's talk about today. How you, we'll stay with you, Elizabeth. Is how do you support women today? From mentoring, just being there for them. What's that role look like for you, and how open is your door for that?
My entire career, my door has been 100% open. I have encouraged, I seek out women just quietly in whatever environment that I am in, and I offer to them that at any time they may come and speak to me, and whatever they say to me will stay there. I have been, I hope, supportive my entire career. I still have people call me from early in my career to talk with me about how to prepare to ask their boss for a raise, how to react to questions that they're going to be asked in a review. I have my friends in my world will ask me to talk with their daughters or their granddaughters, both from how do you present yourself, how do you approach school, how do you stay true to yourself, but how do you have a respectful voice in the world in which we live today. And so just quietly, I just quietly am available, and I let people know that. And as it's taken advantage of, which I'm delighted, then I say to them, feel free and tell your friends. I get emails, I get phone calls. Would you help so and so? I don't know so and so from Adam, but I always say yes.
I think it's amazing too how many times people though may not take you up on that, right? It's like you got this unbelievable career, this success, all the stuff, and people may not take action to do that. Would you agree?
I would agree. I think there's a lot of fear, and women in particular, even today, while we've come really, really far, there is a lot of internal fear that people have that you have to overcome.
Katie, what about you? How's the mentoring, the growth, things that you're doing in today's world to help the future of America, really, for the women in business?
Sure. So, before I get into that, I would just confirm what Elizabeth was saying in terms of her door always being open. I mean, as someone who's been in this role longer than I have, I've certainly appreciated her willingness to have conversations with me that have, and be able to talk about those things that, like you say, it can be hard to get up the courage to share something where you might look vulnerable with somebody else. So I would like to validate what Elizabeth said she's willing to do. So I guess in my view, kind of the way I think about working with women today, I mean, one of the main ways that I work with women is that the vast majority of my client relationships, the female is the one that is probably the one I have the closer relationship to. So the McKinsey's done surveys on this, and two-thirds of women, even though the vast majority of women are breadwinners or co-breadwinners in their home, they still don't consider themselves to be investors and feel that their finances are a top source of stress for them. So, I view it as my mission to help create peace of mind for these busy women who are interested in taking control of their financial future. I mean, they're experts in what they do. And so to be able to hopefully be the person that can help ease this source of stress to allow them to show up better in other parts of their life that are, more important to them is what I kind of view my greatest contribution to be.
And have you seen that, and this is for both of you here, whoever wants to take this question, but have you seen a difference? Because I know I have, as a person who's been in this business for 22 years now, the amount of females I talk to on the phone about the whole plan and their investments has changed dramatically. Right. And so have you too seen that as well in your time?
I absolutely have. And I knew early on in my career, just dynamically, I knew that women control a lot of things, but we weren't allowed to let that show. Right. Mm-hmm. So I knew that, and I watched that happening. And in meetings that I would have early on in my career, I requested that both the man and the woman be there. And I always spoke to both of them. Mm-hmm. So that was a little bit unusual, but that was my quiet way of trying to get women more in the center, if you would. And today, I have many individual female clients, not just couples and so forth. So it has changed considerably.
Talk to us a little bit about, go back to when you were a child, right? And how was the support you received from whether that's to today as, adults have been in the business for a while, who is that mentor you look for now or have you had in your career that's helped get you where you are? Katie?
Yeah. So as I think about the mentors that got me to where I am today, I mean, I think one of the best ways to figure out where you're going next is to have somebody to emulate. So I think of the people that have been willing to provide the constructive feedback, to tell me things that maybe I didn't want to hear but were necessary to hear, and be the one who, demonstrated both professionally and personally what it was that I wanted to pursue in my career.
Katie, I just talked to Katie. Elizabeth, what about you?
So, what I would say there is from the time that we were little, my parents raised us that we would be educated. They come from little tiny towns, and their upbringing was quite different. And I did not know that you had a choice about going to college. I had no idea. I knew you had a choice about what you did after that. So I would say first my parents. And I can remember as a child, my dad taught. I come from a family of 8 children, and there were 6 girls and 2 boys. And my dad would always say that he raised his girls to take care of themselves. And I did not understand what that meant when I was little. So I certainly did when I got older, and every one of us can take care of ourselves. So I look to that moment from my very young years. And then I will say that when I went to college, there was a gentleman there that was the first person I met. I was on work study, and he was so incredibly kind to me. He was the director of admissions. Well, I later learned he had 3 daughters, and I think he just, for whatever reason, took me under his wing. And to this day, he's now well into his 80s, and to this day, he has referred his family to me. I have clients all over the country because of him. And so his belief in me meant everything, and he stayed with me. And every decision that I've made in my career, I'll never forget when I joined Visionary. He called me up and told me how happy he was for me. It was wonderful. So that's what sticks out in my mind.
Well, I think it's cool. I look back and, so again, starting in 2001, I remember coaching a basketball team. I didn't have kids at this time. And I think of some of the people I met there that still refer business. And those relationships are huge. They're absolutely priceless. So thanks for sharing that. Let's turn the page to this. And I say this with a smile because I think the women I'm around, you two, my wife, others, it's kind of that can do all attitude, right? Can women do it all? How do you accomplish that in your daily life? You got family, there's children, career, education, your health. I mean, all the stuff, right? How do you do that? Can you do it all? What are your thoughts on that as a female in business right now, Katie?
So the answer is no, you cannot do it all. And it's unrealistic to even think you can. I mean, by nature, it's just not possible. And that's whether you're male or female.
Don't you think, though, that people, they have that kind of complex,
yeah.
Right?
And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to try to do as much as you can. I mean, it's a worthwhile pursuit. But I think about it, just to try to set expectations that it's not possible to do it all. And the way I tend to think about it is you have to prioritize. And so, I think that setting what those priorities are and then having the courage to make the time for those things that are important to us is about the best we can do. And I think that you also can appreciate that your priorities might shift over time. Mm-hmm. So, in this season of life that I'm in, my daughters are 14 and 11 years old. So I'm very much starting to feel the shortness of how long it is until, in about 7 years, I'm going to have all the free time in the world, so to speak. And so I think, the way I approach kind of my time I spend at work and my time at home right now looks a little bit different than it did 10 years ago when they were little, and 10 years from now as they've moved on to other things. So I think the best we can do is to just, be true to what it is that's important to us, whether it's, work, family, hobbies, charitable work, whatever it might be. And then, be the one that kind of defines how you allocate your time to those things.
Do you have anything you can share with those, maybe the young moms that are listening or young or older moms that are listening that how do you do that? Like, what's your daily process behind that?
Yeah, so I think, I've worked my entire time as a mom. And so when my kids were little, they went to daycare. And, I harbored guilt at, the fact that my husband dropped my kids off at daycare at 7 o'clock in the morning and I might be picking them up at 5:30. I mean, it closed at 6, so you had to be there before then. And so there certainly were times when you're in the car driving to work and it's like, oh, I know my kid doesn't feel 100% today, but, I have to get to work. And, it's like, am I doing the right thing? But, I appreciate now in hindsight that in some respects it was almost a little bit easier then because I knew my kids were taken care of. They knew that I was going to be there for anything important. I didn't miss anything that was, in my view, important to my kids as I was growing up. But now that they're older and that season has shifted a little bit, they're gone all day at school. So I've got all day to devote to those things that are important. Yeah. But when I'm at work, then that means that I kind of need to focus in and get my work done because I might need to leave work at 3 o'clock to pick somebody up from track practice or, go to a soccer game or whatever. Because right now, that's the kind of stuff I don't want to miss. So I think it's just, and this is still a work in progress, but trying to be as present as you can with the time that you are making for the things that you're doing is something that I think is important to think about.
Yeah. Elizabeth, what about you? That can-do attitude or can-do-it-all attitude. What do you say about that?
So I echo all of Katie's comments. I will also say that for me personally, and I would say this to young women, you can do it all, just not all at one time. And I think Katie was mentioning this as well from the perspective that at different times in your life, you focus your energies different. And I have 2 children also who are now grown, and I never missed a darn thing for them. And I made sure that the activities that I did as a mother, that they were ones where I was present with my children. So instead of being in charge of the gift wrap, I went on the field trip. You make some choices that way. And so if you know in your mind all the different things you want to do, I feel like every day my life is in service of others of some sort. I have a husband, I have children, family, clients, etc. And my greatest joys come from them and helping them be the best people that they can be. And so whenever I think about that I just can't do one more thing, or something happens that's a health issue or some other issue, I think to myself what I was told, and that is, there is nothing you can't do for just one day. And sometimes I've had to break that down into 15-minute increments. And I would literally sit there, move it out of my mind, and say, for this 15 minutes, I can do this. And I just believe if you have that continual focus, that you will accomplish what you want to. It may not be in the time frame in which you would like it to be.
And so, you know this, we've had this discussion, but you may not know this, Katie, but Elizabeth sent me, so I had a fear of flying, right? I didn't fly for 8 years. And Miss Elizabeth over here sent me this very nice card before I was getting on my first plane ride. It was June of last year, June of 2022. And she said in the card, there's nothing you can't do for 15 minutes. And I'm like, you have no idea, right? Like, you don't know. I'm going to be scared to death. But I get this little travel rosary, and I've got this, I'm superstitious. So I put this, it's on my finger. It sets the crosses in my hand. And it is amazing because when I sat in that plane that first time and those doors open, I thought that's going to be the freak out moment, right? And so I had this overwhelming sense of peace. But that thought kept coming through my mind. There's nothing I can't do for 15 minutes. Now, you may have to tell yourself that a lot on a 3.5-hour flight to Tahoe, but you can do it, right? And so I also think it reminds me of a story I heard at a conference one time, and I started doing it when my first child was born 17 years ago. I put every Wednesday on my calendar at 3:30, I went home. Right? And the first time I did that, I was scared to death. Like, babe, you don't understand. I had all the reasons in the world why it wasn't going to work, but it worked. And so would you guys agree with the comment that if you put it on the calendar, put your family stuff on the calendar and build your work life around it, you'll make it work?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that I can look back on with pride, and maybe it was naive at the time, but I was going to ask for what was important to me when it came to my family. To me, that was a priority. So, when my first daughter was born, there were only a handful of people. So this was back in 2009. At that time, a handful of people who worked from home. So it was, and by working from home, I mean working from home one day a week. So when I was going to have my first child, I'm like, well, this is very important to me that I am able to work from home one day a week. Now, that didn't mean my child wasn't there with me, but it was just kind of one day to change the routine up a little bit to hopefully make our family time a little better. And so I asked for that, and it was, and my company was very gracious in granting that to me with the understanding that it was a privilege. And I'll tell you, I worked harder on that day that I was at home because I felt like I had something to prove, to make sure people knew that it wasn't a vacation day. It was a day that I truly was working. But I think that just in general, I've been a bit unapologetic about ever making time to do those things that were of highest importance to me. And really, people said yes when I asked. I mean, nobody was, telling me, no, you can't do something like this. So I think sometimes we're afraid to ask, and you just kind of have to do that.
If you don't ask, you won't get it.
That's right. That's right.
Elizabeth, anything on that?
So my path, I'm quite a bit older than Katie, and I would say that I never missed anything, but I had to take a vacation day.
Yeah.
If a woman asked for something, it was greatly frowned upon. So you learn not to ask for that because it just set you back further. And so you would take a vacation day. The number of times I would take my children to daycare and drop them off, and the phone was ringing when I got to work that one of them had thrown up. You have this panic inside yourself. So you watch all the days you have for vacation or sick days. So that was more my reality during the majority of my career until more now. And it's interesting because I'm so grateful. My whole goal was for women to have it better at this part of my career than I did, and hopefully myself and other people maybe a little bit paved that way. But when I had my two children, and when Anna was born, I did not know you did not get paid for maternity leave. I had no idea. And
They did not pay you for maternity leave.
No. And I will never, ever forget that sinking feeling like, what are we going to do? And I'm not going to be able to stay home and take care of her for very long. It's just it's a different world now. And the leave for mothers, for fathers, for adoption, I think it's all wonderful. And so my path was just a little bit different, and I'm glad for where the world's evolved to today.
When you think about it, that's not that long ago, to think how fast it's changed, that you didn't get paid.
Not 1 cent. And I was even worried about the insurance piece of it. Like, do I lose my insurance during this? It was a different world then.
Yeah. So let's talk about now the leader that's listening to this, and this will be out on a podcast later as well. But talk to the leader of the organization, or really anybody in the organization. But what is it that companies can do now to support women more in the workplace, better than we've even done in the last 20 years, 30 years, however long it's been, right? What can we do differently? Elizabeth?
I like to think that you recognize people as professionals. You look to their skill set. Their presence, their skill set, communication skills. And I believe that females have that in droves. They've just never been allowed to show that, so to speak. And I feel like the leaders of any organization, if they would tell themselves when they're looking at a position or looking at culture or the direction of their organization, recognize professionals, then let them be the professionals they are. And when I think about Katie saying, when someone asks you for one day at home or what have you, if instead of making an immediate decision, you look at that person and what that person's contribution is to your firm, if they ask you for something, it's because they want it and need it. And they will, like Katie said, do everything they can to not lose that. Those are your best people. So say yes. Say yes when a good person asks you for something.
Say yes.
Yeah, and I think I very much agree with what Elizabeth was saying. And then to maybe expand on that a little bit, I think just trusting that the person you've hired to do the job has the ability to do the job. So you explain to them what it is that the role will be, and then you give them the autonomy and flexibility to do it in a way that is true to them. So if you hire good people and they've got the capability to do it, know that they will ask when they need assistance. And then just, sometimes that might mean that the work gets done a little bit differently or perhaps on a different time frame, but trust that they're going to get it done.
So this next question, I think, is going to be hard for both of you because I know you both well enough. You're not going to talk about your biggest accomplishments, even though I'm going to ask the question. But I'm going to start with you, Elizabeth. So you were are a Forbes top woman wealth advisor several times. You're 100 of the St. Louisans to know to succeed in business. 100. That's a big deal for you and I, Katie. We get to know one of them, right? And a Who's Who, an American Marquee Lifetime Achievement Award, and nominated